Electra Meccanica is a Canadian-based company that's received a healthy pump from the electric vehicle stock craze. Their first vehicle they plan on manufacturing and selling is the Solo, a one-person, three-wheeled electric vehicle targeted at commuters. The company has actually been showing off prototypes of the vehicle for a few years now, and has had a lot of videos featuring it. It's an interesting concept, a small, likely cheap vehicle for commuting. Although it is important to realize that the company is not currently profitable and has not released the Solo yet. As we can see, they have a negative earnings per share, but they've grown dramatically with all this electric vehicle hype. And perhaps it's not fair to say they haven't exactly sold it. This vehicle's been discussed for years now, and it looks like a few prototypes / early production models were given out / sold to certain select individuals. Currently, they're gearing up for a 2020 launch of the vehicle in LA, but you can't go online and buy one exactly. You can only reserve them with $250 down. There have obviously been tons and tons of different revisions of this vehicle, and a lot of progress that has gone on with it. Although there isn't an exact timeline available on the website, you more need to piece together press releases to find out what's going on. The company, while based in Canada, is going to have their vehicles manufactured in China. The factory is going to be over there, and I'm assuming they'll be heavily reliant on Chinese-made parts. I talked a lot about the risk of Chinese auto manufacturing in my NIO video. I'll have a link in the description, but I'll pull a clip from that video because I think it's very relevant here. The potential risks you run into when you're depending on a vehicle you want to sell in North America that's being built in China. Now, additional capital is good, but tensions between China and the US are much higher than they've been for a while. A company like NIO, with government involvement and the pursuit of tech, could very well face tariffs, outright bans, or other forms of discrimination. The UK and the US have both banned Huawei from dealing with 5G standards and other routing applications. Huawei is a Chinese-owned company that is partially owned by the Chinese government. The combined risk of tariffs and security concerns by Anglosphere nations do elevate the risk of the stock. I think their biggest weakness is also one of their biggest strengths. The Solo vehicle is not only niche, it's insanely niche. On their website, they specifically mention North America. They're launching the vehicle in North America, and they're a company based in North America. But they're creating a product that not a lot of people in North America would want. The trend has been towards larger vehicles. Companies like Ford and GM have straight up stopped selling cars, other than select performance or luxury models, like the Mustang, which is very low volume compared to most of their vehicles. Even in electric vehicles, you see Tesla say the Model Y will be their most popular vehicle, or at least they expect it to, simply because it's the cheapest SUV they make. Additionally, auto manufacturers who are dipping their toes into electric vehicles aren't making cars typically. The Ford Mach-E, the Audi e-tron, Jaguar I-Pace, Mercedes EQC, NIO has built their entire company on SUVs alone, in Asia of all places. There are a lot of reasons for that. 1, SUVs are insanely popular. 2, you have a lot of space to work with, so you can brute force certain things like range. 3, they're seen as more useful, and 4, they're seen as safer. So why do I think this weakness is also a strength? Well, SUVs are big, major market vehicles, especially in North America. That's the sandbox that all the big boys are playing in, so if Electra Meccanica entered the SUV space, it would have to seriously be competitive. Since they're going after a niche, they will have far less competition, but also a huge cap on their maximum growth until they can get into different vehicle classes. As for their niche, I'm scared it's too small. The thing is very clearly not a motorcycle, but in most states, it will likely be considered a motorcycle or autocycle and deal with things like laws and other regulations that go along with that. It also doesn't help the perception of the vehicle. These small three-wheeled vehicles are going to be viewed as a motorcycle-ish vehicle, like a motorcycle. And that mentality is really bad. Motorcycling has been declining year after year. Motorcycle sales are down and down and down. Personally, I ride motorcycles. I really love it. But the view motorcycles get, especially among young people, just seems to be dramatically different than what it used to be. People value safety in vehicles a lot more nowadays, and you're way less safe in a smaller vehicle. There's a lot of data and studies on this, and it's important to look at the studies because they try to correct for certain issues that could prop up and make things inaccurate. But generally, the larger and heavier your vehicle is, the safer you will be during a collision. Women especially prefer SUVs, and women are responsible for around 45% of all vehicle purchases in the US. Really, when it comes to the mentality of smaller vehicles and mainly motorcycles, it's honestly kind of shocking how often I mention I ride in a conversation and people say stuff like, "Oh my God, that's so scary, I could never do that," or "Damn, you really must have a death wish, huh?" I try to explain my perspective, why I ride, why I enjoy it, but millennials are really not into motorcycles. Obviously, you have some young people who are going 180 down the freeway in their Gixxer, wearing a t-shirt, but for the most part, motorcycling and the view of motorcycle-like vehicles in North America is negative. Now, I have a lot of anecdotal stories, but the statistics don't lie. Motorcycles have become less and less popular, especially among young people. That's pretty shocking when you realize you can pick up a running, working, fuel-injected motorcycle for $1,500 or less. It's an incredibly low barrier to entry cost-wise, until you get into maintenance like valve adjustments and rear tires. Moms, girlfriends, and wives hate motorcycles. Again, the Solo very clearly isn't a motorcycle, but it's about perception. Can already hear it in the back of my head. "Honey, I really don't like you riding that thing to work. Can't you just take the Camry? Please, for me." A lot of guys stop riding once they have a kid. Really, once people get married or they have a kid, they tend to grab an SUV, minivan, and stop riding motorcycles. This small vehicle isn't going to be considered safe by a lot of people, and it will be difficult to change the perception of this small, three-wheeled, made-in-China vehicle that is legally classified as a motorcycle and requires a motorcycle license in some states. And this is something you really have to be aware of. The actual people going out and purchasing and driving vehicle sales are likely going to reject this for the most part. You're going to have an incredibly small market, especially as more and more data comes out showing just how unsafe smaller vehicles are compared to these huge SUVs that are widely popular and widely accepted as a standard in North America now. Again, it's not a motorcycle, and it is a little different because it's more car-like, but when we look at Can-Am three-wheelers, they have an appeal to people just barely outside of the interest circle of motorcycles, and a little more for vehicles like the Polaris Slingshot, which actually has a steering wheel. Another thing to consider is the laws. In the United States, we have vehicles like this, the Polaris Slingshot, a three-wheeled vehicle with a steering wheel, much like the Solo. There are a few states that require a motorcycle endorsement. Just take a look at this map. Obviously, the big appeal of this vehicle is in urban areas, and you're going to be killing a lot of your sales in hugely urban areas like New York. Take a look at this map as well. A lot of states have required helmet laws. Now, are cops going to pull you over in these states if you're in an enclosed vehicle not wearing a helmet? Probably not. But if you have dealers in those states, are those businesses going to technically violate the law during test rides? If someone dies in this thing due to the worst crash rating, and maybe it becomes news, will the mayor or parents of the dead person raise hell about helmet laws not being enforced? It's complicated. Helmets aren't comfortable, and that's going to hurt a lot of the appeal for this vehicle. You are looking at a market of people willing to drive these smaller motorcycle-like vehicles. So most people with kids or who are settling down are cut out. If you have a significant other, how are you going to move the two of you around? This can't be a primary vehicle then. Young people are really turned off from these style of vehicles. Maybe you could get some mid-20 urbanites, but a lot of these people live in major cities like Chicago or New York. When I was in Chicago, I walked everywhere, I took public transportation, and I used ride-sharing apps. I didn't actually own a car. And then you have to consider what proportion of those people are willing to ride a motorcycle. Why would you buy something that is way more expensive, way slower, and way less cool? Not to mention, if you're in California, you can't lane split with this thing like you can with a motorcycle, which is kind of crazy when you consider they're launching it in LA. Maybe there would be an appeal for winter riding, but for winter riding, you'd probably want a four-wheel drive vehicle, or a vehicle with just four wheels, period. I know in a lot of cities they do a very poor job of taking care of the roadways during winter. Chicago actually does a surprisingly good job. But then you also have to consider urban areas like LA, where they're launching this thing, where you can ride a motorcycle year-round, basically. A motorcycle can hold 2 or more people. This holds 1 person. And if you're riding a bagger, you might be able to hold more cargo if you're in a Goldwing. Their pre-order numbers aren't bad, but are these things going to really sell year after year? They're working on this Roadster, and I'm sure they'll go after other vehicles in the future, but I seriously wonder how many sales this company will get. How long will it take for them to turn a profit? Will they turn a profit? Will they run out of investor money? They haven't sold a single vehicle in the traditional sense yet. It's all been extremely controlled small distribution. And I'm sort of scared that they're not going to start off strong. I really like the enthusiasm this company has, the willingness to go and talk about their product, show it off, and keep people updated on the factory. They have tons of great updates on their website, but I find it very hard to see this as a successful product personally. I think it's probably too niche to offer it at a reasonable price. And I think most people would agree with me. Currently, they're saying the MSRP of the 2020 model is $18,500. You can buy a brand new Honda Civic or Toyota Corolla for less than $2,000 more. And especially with all the rebates and incentives manufacturers are offering, you can buy a brand new 2021 Corolla for less than you can buy the Solo. That's a little crazy when you consider just how reliable, fuel efficient, and capable these cars are. I really love the Corolla. It's so reliable, easy to maintain, surprising amount of space, and it's not that particularly large. You can squeeze it into most parking lots. Remember, the Solo is not a motorcycle. You can't squeeze it into motorcycle type slots. So really, you'd only have an advantage over something like a Corolla or Civic if you live in a very, very tight, maybe English city or something. Well, I guess the English aren't the only ones with tight roads. A lot of places in Europe are like that. But you won't be able to buy one in Europe because it's launching in North America, in LA, where everyone is driving around Corollas from the 80s because they're so unbelievably reliable and cheap to maintain and run. I don't have the same concerns about the company like I did NKLA, but I do find it hard to see their current flagship taking off. Yes, a lot of people commute to work on their own, but again, something like a Corolla can fit 5 people compared to 1. Maybe I'm wrong. They could have a lot of market data and believe they will make a profit off this product, but it just seems so unlikely to me, especially with the direction that the average consumer is going in North America.